Hey everybody, this morning I am on the northern border, very close to the northern border on the northeast side of Indianapolis, just off to the north by roughly half a mile or so is that northern border. I'm in Som Park, and we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of living just north of Indianapolis, Indiana in this video, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or north of Indianapolis and the cities just to the north of Indianapolis, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and also tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. And we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about Indianapolis, of course, but a lot of people have questions about some of those cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, like the cities north of Indianapolis. I'm talking about Carmel, Indiana, Zionsville, Indiana, Fishers, Indiana, Noblesville, and Westfield, Indiana as well. So if you have questions about any of those cities and towns, then make sure you reach out any way you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. So again, guys, I am just on the northern edge of Indianapolis. I could go a little bit further and get closer to the edge because right out here is 91st Street. I told you I'm in Som Park, which is an Indianapolis public park. There's a public golf course, Som Golf Course right over there. There's a disc golf course right here behind me. But if you go just to the north of here up to 96th Street and you go just north of that, you'll get into Fishers, Indiana. Just to the west of here and north of 96th Street, you get into Carmel. So we are really on the northern edge of Indianapolis. And there are a lot of people that live in Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is in Marion County. And so in Marion County, along with Indianapolis, which takes up most of Marion County, there's more than 900,000 people. But the next most populated place around Indianapolis is just over here to the north. When you get into Hamilton County, where Carmel, Fishers, Westfield, Noblesville, they're all located. Zionsville's in a different county. It's in Boone County, just off to the west, but it's connected to Carmel and a little bit of Westfield, actually. So I would consider it one of the northern suburbs, one of the northern cities and towns. But it's not included in that population of Hamilton County, which is close to 350,000 people. So very populated there. Now, a lot of people live there for a huge number of reasons. It's a very nice place to live. It's nice looking, it's peaceful. That's a subjective thing though, but I would say it's peaceful as in it's not terribly frantic, and it's certainly quite safe. So peaceful can go along with that. Schools are phenomenal, highly rated in any one of the cities and towns there. So very popular place to be for sure. So that doesn't mean it's perfect, of course. So we're going to talk about those pros and the cons of living north of Indianapolis, Indiana, in any one of those cities and towns. So we'll go through 3 pros and 3 cons here in this video. We'll start with the pros. So pro number 1 is that when you live on the north side, when you have so many people, you got Indianapolis right here to the south, and then, as I said, there's more than 300,000 people in Hamilton County making up all of those cities. Carmel is over 100,000 people. Fishers is the same. And then you get to Noblesville, there's 66,000 people or so. And Westfield's about 50,000 people. Zionsville's under 30,000 people, so it's a much smaller town, but still when you throw it in the mix of the north side of Indy, it adds a whole lot of people. So when you have that many people, you have a lot of amenities. So if you're living north of Indianapolis, you are close to, your location is close to so much. So you've got things here in Indianapolis that are pretty big that you could get to pretty easily, like the Fashion Mall, KEYSTONE Mall. And the malls may not be a big deal to you, but they are to some people for shopping or very particular stores. And you got the Fashion Mall, which is the high-end mall of Indianapolis, right there in KEYSTONE on the north side of Indianapolis. You've also got Castleton Square Mall on the north side of Indianapolis. Now, of course, those are in Indianapolis, but if you get outside of that, on the north side, you've got the Monon Trail, which is the trail that runs from basically downtown, the Bottle Works, all the way up through Indianapolis to the north, through Carmel, through Westfield, and north of that. So the north side has the Monon Trail, and not just the Monon Trail, there's the Midland Trace Trail and some other trails as well that can connect to the Monon. You've got Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center on the north side up in Noblesville. You've got Hamilton Town Center, big shopping, outdoor shopping mall. You've got Clay Terrace, another big outdoor shopping mall over in Carmel, near the intersection of US 31 and 146th Street. So you are near quite a bit on the north side. And of course that would be very commercial outside of the Monon Trail and some of the other trails. but you're close to all of that, and you don't have to drive a great distance at all to get to any of those things. It's not that other places don't have malls or shopping centers, they certainly do, but you've got quite a bit of those things and quite a few other things like RUA, Home Mortgage Music Center. We used to call it Deer Creek, so it's so hard for me to say that. It's going through so many different names over the years, different sponsors. It used to be Verizon, it was Klipsch at one point in time, and now it's Ruoff. But for people who lived in Indianapolis for a very long time, it was always called Deer Creek Music Center. But places like that are all over the north side, or at least big gathering places. And of course, when you have those, you have restaurants and you have things to do as well. Plus, you're near MORSE Reservoir or MORSE Lake up in Noblesville and Cicero, which is a pretty cool place and actually not a bad place to access for the public. There's some places that you can do that. There's GEIST Reservoir, which is less easy or harder to access from the public, but you can get there on a GEIST Lake or GEIST Reservoir. And you don't have those things so close to so many populated areas in most of the other parts of Indianapolis. So even if you go over to Zionsville, that is very close to Eagle Creek Park, and which is a giant municipal park. It's an Indianapolis park. So if you live on the northwest side of Indianapolis or anywhere in Indianapolis, you can go to this park. But at Zionsville, Brownsburg, places like that, you're very close to it. So you're close to a lot of the really big features in a lot of big places around Indianapolis by living on the north side. The second pro, I'd say, is the infrastructure is really quite nice on the north side. There have been a lot of improvements over the last really 15 years, and inside the last 10 years, a tremendous number of improvements. The north side over, I'd say, the last 30 years or so has not had the best reputation for traffic. And it's understandable why there would be traffic, because again, it's a very populated part of that portion outside of Indianapolis. Indianapolis, it has traffic, but traffic is a subjective thing. Traffic to one person is just nothing to somebody else. So if you're used to an hour commute or an hour and a half commute sitting in bumper to bumper traffic, Indianapolis traffic's just flat out gonna be a joke to you. It's just not that bad. But if you lived in Indianapolis all your life, you're gonna notice the nuances in the places where it's a little bit better and in some places where it's a little bit worse. And the north side has never been a place that has a great reputation for traffic. But in reality, definitely gonna have people that disagree with me on this, but I think it's really more reasonable to say that it's dramatically improved. Dramatically. So Keystone Parkway, which is a major north-south road, US 31, which is a major north-south road, even roads like Hazeldale Parkway, north and south, easily get from Indianapolis through Carmel, all the way up into Westfield and Noblesville using a road like that. You don't have stoplights on those roads anymore. Hazeldale does when you get further north, much further north, like at 146th Street and north of that. But outside of that, there really aren't any. There aren't any on Keystone, and there aren't any on US 31, where years ago, 20 years ago, that was completely different. So 20 years ago, there was a stoplight at every major road. And so of course, people coming from Carmel, working in Indianapolis in the morning, backed up traffic. And then everybody in the evening leaving Indianapolis and going back to either Carmel or Fishers, and you go up, let's say, State Road 37, which is going through the same improvements right now, very close to being completed, where all the stoplights are being removed, and you go either under or over all of the major roads, the major east-west roads. That was another super hot spot for traffic. Now, it does still get heavy, absolutely does, but it's usually always moving. So in addition to those major improvements on those roads, we all know the roundabouts in Carmel exist. And whether you like them or not, I think it's a little bit crazy to criticize them too much, because they absolutely have major benefits. They are much safer than stoplights. They're less expensive than maintaining stoplights and even installing them. They look better. You can just keep going with the traffic. It doesn't back traffic up. Are there times where you can be stuck at a roundabout, 2 or 3 people in front of you because they can't get into it because it's so crowded? Absolutely. But really, that's pretty rare for the most part. That doesn't happen that often. So that infrastructure piece, that addition in Carmel, but has also leaked out into Zionsville, Noblesville, Westfield, Fishers, and Indianapolis. There are roundabouts in Indianapolis, and there are roundabouts in Greenwood on the south side. There are roundabouts in Plainfield, Avon, Brownsburg, over in Greenfield on the east side. They've started to spill out into other places. So other city leaders have taken notice of those roundabouts and the improvement to the infrastructure that they've made. they're really quite nice. And the north side is full of those and full of methods for keeping traffic moving. So the reputation for the north side having bad traffic, I think, is absurd anymore. Of course it's dense, but that's just because there's a lot of people on the north side. But the traffic just isn't that bad, and it certainly isn't near where it used to be. So I think that's actually one of the pros of living on the north side, is just the fact that while there's a lot of people, you can still move, and it doesn't realistically take you very long to get just about anywhere. And speaking of that, that brings me to the third pro, is that if you're living on the north side and it doesn't take you very long just to get about anywhere, is that you can take advantage of all the good things that those cities have to offer all throughout the year. So right now this video is being shot in the summer, and every single city, Noblesville, Westfield, Carmel, Zionsville, Fishers, all on the north side, have their own farmers markets. They have incredible farmers markets, and you could go from one to the other if you wanted to on a Saturday when they're open. It wouldn't take you very long to get from one to the other. It might take you 20 minutes or so. So if you got to early to one of them, you might be able to hit a couple of them after the first one that you hit. If you wanted to see an outdoor concert, like if you wanted to go to the Fishers Amphitheater, which in my opinion kind of just blows all the amphitheaters away on the north side, but the other ones still have some pretty cool places to see some outdoor music and some nice amphitheaters. They all have them. Noblesville does. Carmel has a place as well. Westfield, Zionsville has a great place to see outdoor music. And they all have not just an amphitheater, but they have smaller venues as well where you can see some music outside, or even at a local restaurant or something like that. So it's pretty easy to bounce around from city to city. And of course, they all have their own downtown area. Some are larger than others. Most people are pretty aware of Carmel's downtown. Carmel's actually, for a city of its size of 100,000 people or a little over that, the downtown area of Carmel is pretty big, and it's made up of really three parts. You've got the Arts and Design District to the north, you've got Midtown, which is kind of in the center of downtown, and then you've got City Center, just on the south side. You can live anywhere in Indianapolis, anywhere, or anywhere surrounding Indianapolis, and go to what downtown Carmel has to offer. But if you already live on the north side, you're never that far from it. Even if you live all the way in northeast Noblesville and you want to get to downtown Carmel, it's not going to take you more than 30 minutes to get there. And of course that depends on the traffic, but the traffic, if it's heavy, it may slow you down by really just a couple of minutes. It's not going to be 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or something absurd like an hour. Absolutely is just not going to happen. It would have to be a really special event for something like that to happen. But being on the north side, you aren't isolated in your own city. You can go to any one of those and enjoy anything that they have to offer. You don't have to be a citizen in that city to enjoy what it has to offer. Just like you don't have to be a resident of Indianapolis to come into Indianapolis to enjoy any of the restaurants in Indianapolis, the museums in Indianapolis, or to see an Indianapolis Indians game downtown, or a Colts game, or a Pacers game, or a Fever game, or any of the concerts they have downtown, or any of the conventions they have downtown, or any of the parks in Indianapolis, like Eagle Creek Park that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. That's an Indianapolis park. It's a municipal park, but you can live anywhere in the area and go there. So you just aren't that far from all of those really cool, super positive things that the north side has to offer. So let's get into some of the cons. And the cons can be a little subjective as well, just like the pros are, of course. But one of the cons, I feel like, living on the north side, I don't live in Fishers anymore. My family and I, we lived in Fishers for a very long time, 16 years actually. And we have since moved, but only moved. We would not have moved because we really love Fishers, but we only moved because we needed to be closer to where my wife works. So we just wanted to be a few minutes from that, because her distance that she was from her work, where we were in Fishers, just took a long time to drive. And it took 40 to 45 minutes. And if there was any traffic, it would delay her another 5 or 10 minutes. So if she left later in the evening, it would just really make for a late arrival, and with young kids, and it was just on a day-to-day basis kind of killing us. So we moved east, and we're definitely a little further from Fishers now, but we absolutely loved it. But we're still in the same situation that we were in Fishers, is that we weren't, and we aren't, very close to the airport, Indianapolis International Airport. And while that doesn't sound like a big con, but we use the airport multiple times a year. And if we've got an early flight, let's say a flight that leaves at 6:30 in the morning, which is not uncommon. If we're taking a vacation, going somewhere, or my wife has to travel for work, or if I've got to travel for some reason too, you got to get there very early, which means you got to get out of bed extremely early, because the drive from the north side of the airport in a lot of cases can be 40, 45 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer than that, depending on where you are on the north side. If you're way north and way northeast, then just physically you're far from the airport. So if you've got to travel quite a bit for your job, you got to get to the airport quite a bit, that's just something you need to consider. Are you okay with that drive? I can tell you, of course, whenever you come home, because we've done this multiple times with all our kids from a vacation, from a trip, and our flight lands at 10 or 10:30 at night, something like that, because sometimes we'll do that. We'll have an entire day at the place that traveled to, and we don't leave there until the evening, and we get back here to Indy at 10 or 10:30, and then we still have another 45-minute drive before we can get home. I mean, that's part of traveling. We don't love it. I would love to be a whole lot closer to the airport just because we do utilize it. So that's something you certainly need to think about. You're going to be, just mileage-wise, a pretty good way away from the Indianapolis International Airport. All right, another con of living on the north side, and of course this is a subjective thing, and you may not care. And when I lived on the north side, when I lived in Fishers, I was one of those people. I didn't care about this because I lived there and I enjoyed it. You will notice after living in Indianapolis or on the north side, or especially the south side, that there will be a reputation. There'll be a reputation, especially for a north sider. So somebody that lives, let's say in Fishers or Carmel or Zionsville, which are known to have expensive homes. Zionsville and Carmel are the two most expensive places to live around Indianapolis. So of course, if it's an expensive city, then of course a reputation usually follows that. So you'll hear people say those rich people in Zionsville, those rich people in Carmel, or that people that live in a place on the north side of Indianapolis, like Carmel or Zionsville, that they have some kind of attitude. And that usually is not true. This is the Midwest, and usually you're gonna find mostly Midwest attitudes. Now, can you find nasty, really horrible people in Carmel, Indianapolis, Greenwood, Avon, Plainfield? Better believe it. And I've definitely run across them. And I know you probably have as well. Most of the time, when people talk like that, it's just a little shocking, it strikes a nerve, and so it makes it memorable. But it's harder to remember some of the average interactions that you have with people. And average interactions usually don't strike a nerve, or they aren't memorable because they weren't shocking to you. And they were really, for the most part, pretty pleasant. And that's the way most people are. A lot of people want to live in those cities because they are nice. And if they can afford it, they will. If they can't afford it, that is unfortunate. But there are other very nice places to live. And even on the north side of Indianapolis, there are other very nice places to live outside of the more expensive ones like Carmel and Zionsville. But just know that if you are in another part of Indianapolis or around Indianapolis, it's possible that this pseudo reputation could pop up. It could rear its ugly head, because it truly is kind of an ugly thing. And I wouldn't say it's terribly strong like it might be in some other cities and towns across the country, but there's a sense of it here. It's there, and if you live here long enough, you will eventually notice that exists. The last con we'll talk about here living on the north side, or north of Indianapolis, and I would say, again, this one's kind of a subjective thing too, but it can be frustrating, is that the north side is rapidly growing. Now, Carmel and Fishers aren't growing nearly as fast anymore because they've run out of room. But Noblesville is still growing pretty fast, and Westfield is still growing exceptionally fast. So that leaves a lot of questions about what some places are gonna be like in the future. And if you live in those areas where the expansion is taking place, or where we have to kind of move backwards in a place that was already established, and because it's expanding past that, the infrastructure has to be redone where you are to accommodate that growth, living within that year upon year upon year, it won't be for 20 years, but it could be 1, 2, 3 years in your area of changes and construction. That is absolutely not the story across the entire north side. Not at all. But there are certain areas where that's absolutely a fact, where you're going to see that for a number of years. Now, where those pockets are, we'd have to talk about that. So if you have questions about, hey, I don't want to be in an area where I know they're going to be redoing a whole lot around me. I want to be in a more established part of the north side, where I know it's not going to be, wow, this is really dense here and kind of dark. So I want to know it's not really going to change all that much over the years. We would have to talk about that. Reach out, and I'm happy to chat with you about some of those places that look to be going through some kind of upheaval in the near future, and those that are probably fairly immune to something like that for a long time, just based on where that place is located. So there you have 3 pros and 3 cons of living north of Indianapolis. If you have questions about any of the cities and towns surrounding Indianapolis, including the ones on the north side and Indianapolis itself, reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.